no surprise to anyone that the holiday season is a stressful time of year, but it can be particularly difficult for perfectionists. And you know who they are. They're the ones who plans the parties, the events, and they need everything to be just perfect. And when you're trying to cook the most delicious dinner or the most thoughtful gift, this time of year can really rev up anxiety and depression levels. And joining us tonight is Simon Sherry, Associate Professor of Psychology and Neuroscience at Dalhousie University in Halifax and perfectionism expert. Welcome.
Welcome.
So the first question is probably the most obvious. Why is the holiday season so stressful?
I think it's stressful for many people, but that may be especially true for perfectionists. These individuals are expert at anticipating and generating stress. As you can imagine, there are many hassles and irritants to cope with over the holiday season, and perfectionism seems to be something that exacerbates those hassles and stressors.
Now, many of us might consider ourselves perfectionists, but what actually defines a perfectionist?
Perfectionists have a rigid and inflexible requirement that the self or other people be perfect. That's often accompanied by intense self-criticism, a really strong or exaggerated concern over mistakes, and also often a nagging sense of self-doubt that what they've done just isn't good enough, so they better try again.
So why is this time of year particularly stressful for them in particular?
Perfectionists are often very concerned with what other people think, and they may be especially concerned with displaying their self as perfect to others over the holidays through cooking the perfect meal, being the perfect host, decorating the perfect tree, or whatever the case may be.
Does that also make them more competitive?
Certainly, perfectionists aren't just competitive, they're often hyper-competitive, and they tend to do things for the championship of the world or not at all.
What are some of the challenges perfectionists can bring about for others?
Certainly, a lot of perfectionists struggle to play nicely with other people. They don't just have a personal requirement for perfection, but often they direct their need for perfection outward to other people and can be quite entitled or excessive in their demands or expectations for others.
So if you know someone or suspect someone is a perfectionist, how can you let them know that it's okay to make mistakes or to help relieve stress levels this time of year?
I think that can sometimes be difficult because perfectionists might receive nearly any feedback as a form of criticism, something they dislike. But certainly if you approach someone who's perfectionistic with compassion and warmth and kindness, that would help.
And how does perfectionism contribute to depression and anxiety levels going up?
In addition to generating a lot of stress, perfectionists are often left with a chronic sense of dissatisfaction. There's often a distressing gap between the person they feel themselves to be and the person they actually want to be. And so they're often left feeling, I think, quite unnecessarily defective or self-critical.
Now, perfectionists or not, how do we lower stress and anxiety levels during the holiday season?
Certainly for perfectionists, there's two things I'd wish for them over the holidays. One would be an increased sense of acceptance. Perfectionists often struggle to come to terms with what is. They're often at war with a reality that they find to be imperfect, and because they struggle so greatly with acceptance, they're often battling either themselves or other people. The second key thing we often see missing in perfectionists is compassion. And this can involve some warmth or kindness directed toward the self as opposed to criticism or judgment. And with compassion comes a common sense of humanity that you're not the only one who's ever burnt the turkey or what have you on Christmas.
And again, those rules also apply for people who do not consider themselves perfectionists.
Absolutely. Compassion and acceptance are fundamental tools that help all people be well.
Definitely need to remember that to reduce stress this time of year. Thank you very much for coming in tonight.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Simon Sherry is an Associate Professor of Psychology and Neuroscience at Dalhousie University in Halifax.